Up in a few moments, but first, let's go 25 and count it down to 11. The BCS standings brought to you by Vizio, Washington, and Arizona back in the mix. Kent State, the only team to beat Rutgers, and only with a single loss to Kentucky, but still, they're in the top 25. Oklahoma State, Boise State in there. As you go 20 through 16, you got a couple of Big East teams in the mix.
Well, how about if you're Rutgers right now, sick to your stomach that you lost to Kent State, because had you won that, you'd be one of two automatic qualifying teams undefeated right now that's still eligible to play for a BCS National Championship.
And you know, Texas also gets a shot at Kansas State. They can get in the top 14, maybe get some help in Bedlam from Oklahoma State. Who knows where Texas might wind up. And then 15 through 11, Beavers sitting there at 15 too, Dave.
The Beavers are there, and they're going to have a test against Oregon. You look at South Carolina and Clemson facing off this week. That means a lot for the strength of FSU if South Carolina loses to Clemson.
Also means a lot for Clemson in terms of its at-large.
Yeah.
If the Tigers could win, they would be a very attractive BCS at-large candidate. So now we have 11 through 20. Third week in a row we've had a change at the top. First time that's happened in 5 years. And inexplicable. Just ahead of the Seminoles, Texas A&M. Aggies might have had their at-large hopes take a hit. We'll explain that in a moment. Just ahead of Texas A&M, Stanford. I don't think they care where they're ranked. The Stanford Cardinal can beat UCLA twice. They go to the Rose Bowl, ultimate prize in the Pac-12. At number 7, LSU. There is a possibility. LSU remote still has an outside shot maybe of making it all the way up into the top 2 and playing again if further chaos ensues. At number 6, the former number 1, Kansas State. Now, Kansas State took a hit in the computers, obviously, by losing to Baylor, and a big hit in the polls as Kansas State falls to 7 and 8 in the 2 polls. Probably the way they lost would remove the Wildcats from consideration among one-loss teams. So now we're to the top 5. Look, there's no drama at number 1. We know there's only one undefeated team eligible for the title, the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame. Number 1 in the BCS for the first time in school history. 14 years in the BCS, 12 times a team that goes into the final 2 weeks of the season ranked number 1 has played for the national championship. Only 2 times it didn't happen, a team lost in the SEC championship game. Alabama in 08, Florida in 09. Very important now to see where the SEC teams stack up in relation to where Oregon fell. The Ducks were number 2, and Oregon falls to number 5. Now, Oregon is number 4 in both polls, but the computers are a major problem. They're 7th in the computers. Here's why it's a problem. Florida is just ahead of them, and the Gators are a solid number 2 in the computers. Simply put, if Oregon wants to get back into the mix, their cleanest path is to get Florida out of the way and hope that Florida State can beat them on Saturday. 2 and 3, the order really doesn't matter. Number 3 is Georgia. Number 2 is Alabama, and the Crimson Tide, if it can beat Auburn on Saturday, would play the Bulldogs for the SEC championship, and assuming no loss by the Dogs to Georgia Tech.
Instead of doing the show, you know, why is it a team gets more penalized when they lose late in the year? I mean, why should Oregon be 5, as you know, opposed to all these SEC teams who were way over here the week before? You know? Thank God the playoff is coming soon. Let's see what Kirk has to say about it.
Key teams in the top 10. I know they've won 6 straight titles, but I think the question that many people have, Oregon falls to 5 after a loss in overtime. They're still undefeated in regulation. Is the SEC getting too much of the benefit of the doubt this year?
Reese, I think it's all about when you lose, the later you lose, you're going to drop down. And then you don't have as many games to try to work yourself back up. And 1 week ago, all the SEC region was crying and complaining that they don't get enough respect, even though they were stacked up there, what was it, from 4 to 9, but they needed help. And so 1 week ago, the SEC's on the outside looking in. A week later, we have Baylor upsets Kansas State, and of course Oregon goes down, and now the SEC champion is back in play. And now we're going to ask, are they getting the benefit of the doubt? I don't think they are at all. Obviously, they have history, 6 years in a row. You kind of earn that. But if you look at their top 5 or 6 teams, and you compare their top 5 or 6 teams to the Big 12, to the Pac-12, to the Big 10, the ACC, the Big East, there's no comparison. The SEC, it's not necessarily that they get preferential treatment. I think the fact is that they earn that based on the way they play football games.
Up to this point, Oregon's best win is only number 24 Arizona. And then you look at Kansas State and Florida State, they should be further back in this top 10 based on the team they lost to and how they lost that game.
Okay, but here becomes the problem, okay? Do you think Florida could beat Oregon?
Yeah.
You think Florida would beat Oregon?
I think they could beat. Yeah, it could beat Oregon.
What would you pick? What would you pick?
What both play their A game?
Both
If
play
both play their A game, then I think it's Oregon. But I'll tell you what, watching Oregon play in the month of November when we knew they were going to see how good they were, they haven't been overly impressive.
But see, I think that's where it becomes the problem, because you can pick out a team right here and I can make a case against it. I mean, Florida with the huge wins. I mean, 3 top 11 wins, another chance against Florida State. You could look at Alabama and say, they've got one impressive win against LSU. The other hard team that they played, A&M, they lost at home. I mean, so we could start doing this game, but then we talked about this earlier. How do you diagnose which team is good because they haven't played a great schedule, or which team is dominant and you really feel like they are good in all phases of the game and they can beat anybody?